In the not-too-distant future, the mining spaceship Borealis is on its long voyage across space with its entire crew in cryosleep. Their journey to their destination is still 4 years away. However, disaster strikes when an asteroid collides with the ship, setting off alarms and plunging the vessel into chaos. Andy, still encased in his cryopod, is suddenly jolted awake by a video message from his family back on Earth. As the ship's AI announces a hull breach and initiates the emergency survival protocols, mechanical arms spring into action, assembling an emergency suit for Andy. The suit is equipped with limited oxygen and a personal AI. Moments later, the emergency launch sequence is triggered, ejecting all the cryopods from the Borealis. The pods are scattered in different directions, some of them caught in explosions as parts of the ship are consumed by flames. As Andy's pod continues its ejection, the mechanical arms complete his helmet and the pod's thrusters are activated, sending it hurtling toward the nearest planet. When the pod re-enters the planet's atmosphere, the gravitational forces are overwhelming. The pods plummet uncontrollably, some bursting upon impact while others burn up in the atmosphere. Andy's pod tries to deploy wings to stabilize the descent, but they break off and the pod loses its thrusters. It crashes into elevated terrain, sliding down the rugged landscape until it finally comes to a halt. Regaining consciousness, Andy sees a vision of his family before the AI attempts to administer a defibrillator, mistakenly diagnosing him with a heart attack. He quickly disables the device, realizing the severity of the situation. Looking out the window, Andy sees that he's stranded on a barren and desolate planet. His attempts to make contact with anyone over the radio fail. Suddenly the pod begins to move and the AI warns that the terrain is unstable, urging Andy to exit. However, the pod door won't open. In a panic, Andy checks the survival kit only to find that the flare gun is missing, a direct result of his low rank. He kicks at the door but it doesn't budge. Using a fire extinguisher, he manages to break the glass, but the pod tilts, sending him back inside. The broken glass cuts his suit and Andy starts losing oxygen. Thankfully, he has a repair spray which he uses to seal the tear. Just as he's beginning to regain control, the pod's engine short circuits, igniting a small fire behind the seat. In a state of panic, Andy grabs a toy his son gave him, finding a brief moment of comfort before pushing dirt to escape the pod. He crawls out just as the pod fills with smoke. Looking up, he watches in horror as the Borealis falls from the sky, exploding in a massive burst of flames. The shockwave knocks him to the ground, but he quickly recovers and checks the AI for information. He learns that the Borealis only made it halfway to its destination, and that he's stranded in uncharted territory. A distant light catches his attention, prompting Andy to begin his journey toward it, still trying to contact anyone over the radio. After traveling for some time, Andy stumbles upon the wreckage of the Borealis and another cryopod. Upon investigation, he finds an oxygen tank and opens the pod, only to be met with the chilling sight of a lifeless crew member. Noticing that the oxygen tank is broken, Andy is left unsettled. Before he can make sense of the situation, he leaves the pod, noticing bloodstains surrounding it, and realizes something sinister may be at play. Nonetheless, he presses on. As he continues, Andy notices blinking SOS lights in the distance, surrounded by a powerful windstorm. Cautiously, he approaches and finds Dwayne, a fellow crew member who has managed to gather some survival equipment. Dwayne explains that the company had taken a shortcut through an asteroid belt to save fuel, which ultimately led them to this unknown area. He reveals he's trying to send an SOS message that will take 8 months to reach Earth, or 2 years if a fast rescue ship is used. Andy begins to feel hopeless but decides that they should search the other half of the Borealis wreckage for more supplies. As Dwayne steps back, Andy accidentally disconnects some equipment, triggering an attack by a monstrous creature that pounces on Dwayne and drags him away. Andy rushes to help, but when he turns around, he finds himself alone. In desperation, Andy sends an SOS message to Earth and grabs Dwayne's gun. The AI reminds him that his oxygen levels are critically low, but Andy refuses to give up. He sets a course for the largest remaining piece of the Borealis wreckage and begins the journey toward it, all the while attempting to contact any other survivors on the radio. Hours later, Andy reaches the edge of a cliff and notices that his AI is malfunctioning. Overcome with frustration, Andy screams, his emotions taking control. Just as he is about to give in, he hears a faint voice through the radio, Naomi, another survivor. Though the connection is poor at first, Andy eventually manages to establish a clearer line. Naomi reveals that she's trapped in her pod, and that she, Andy, and Dwayne are the only 3 survivors. Naomi shares her location with Andy, but the AI warns him that reaching her would require more oxygen than he has. Naomi urges Andy to take the risk, promising she has enough oxygen for both of them. Determined, Andy agrees and begins running toward her, all the while communicating with Naomi on the radio. His heart races as he pushes himself forward. After some time, Andy reaches a treacherous area filled with jagged terrain and notices strange shifting shadows. He stops to investigate but finds nothing. Moments later, rocks begin to shift underfoot, accompanied by low growls in the distance. Something large and menacing is nearby. Panicking, Andy accelerates his pace, navigating through more dangerous terrain dotted with jagged holes. He realizes that the holes are likely the work of monstrous creatures burrowing underground. He suddenly comes upon a larger hole covered in sticky webs and quickly deduces that these are the paw prints of something even more dangerous. Terrified, Andy tries to move quickly, but the growling intensifies. Andy rushes through the terrain, but the growling continues and the creatures begin stalking him from the shadows. His heartbeat quickens as the rustling grows louder. The air becomes frigid and snow begins to fall heavily. Andy squints through the blizzard, startled by strange noises and shadows moving around him. He realizes he's being hunted by something far larger than he can handle. Suddenly the ground beneath him rumbles, and his stomach drops as a massive creature bursts from the earth, nearly capturing him. The creature, a monstrous, spider-like beast, leaps toward him, but Andy narrowly dodges. Desperately, he searches for a way out, only to find himself falling into a crack in the ground. The creature's legs stretch toward him, but Andy narrowly escapes its grasp. At that moment, Naomi's voice comes through again, directing him toward a safer location. She explains that the creatures are likely attracted to heat, and Andy needs to stay low to the ground. As he continues toward Naomi, Andy is ambushed by another spider but quickly fights it off using Dwayne's gun. However, his oxygen is running dangerously low and he's becoming increasingly disoriented. Despite the dire situation, Andy presses on, driven by the hope of reaching Naomi. Finally, he reaches Naomi's location where she's alive but paralyzed from the waist down. The two survivors face the grim reality of their predicament, but Naomi still has the last remaining oxygen tank, giving them a fighting chance to survive. Andy, his oxygen reserves running low, begins to feel the full weight of the situation. His mind races as he scans their surroundings, taking in the desolate landscape and the threats that lurk just out of sight. Naomi, despite her paralysis, remains strong, urging him to stay focused. Together, they begin to plan their next move, aware that time is quickly running out. Naomi suggests that they attempt to reach a nearby structure that may provide shelter or further supplies, but Andy hesitates, unsure if they have the energy to make the journey. The oxygen tank is barely enough for the two of them, and the dangers of the unknown planet continue to loom. They are both exhausted, mentally and physically drained, but the realization that they're in this together gives them a glimmer of hope. They begin their trek toward the structure, moving slowly to conserve energy. The wind picks up, howling through the barren terrain, and the ground beneath them becomes more treacherous. The eerie silence is broken only by the distant growl of the creatures that still hunt them from the shadows. Every step feels heavier, but they press on. As they near the structure, Naomi's voice falters over the radio, her breathing shallow. Andy urges her to hold on, but he can see the strain in her eyes. They've come so far, yet the final stretch feels like an eternity. Just as they reach the entrance to the structure, the ground trembles again and they both freeze, listening for any signs of the creatures. The sound of something massive moving through the earth sends a chill down their spines. They dive inside the structure, slamming the door behind them just as the ground shakes violently. Inside, they find a small abandoned facility with power still running, though it's unclear how much longer it will last. Naomi collapses, her energy depleted, and Andy hurriedly sets up the oxygen tank, allowing both of them to breathe more easily. Exhausted but relieved to have found shelter, Andy sits down next to Naomi. They share a quiet moment, knowing the struggle is far from over. The planet's dangers remain, and they still don't know when or if help will arrive. But for now, they have survived another day, together,